Yes.
So, Grandma, tell me a little bit about yourself. So, you were born in Orem? Where were you born?
Me?
Yes.
I was born in Vineyard, Utah. Vineyard.
Where is that?
Down where the steel plant is.
Oh, okay.
Actually, down where UVSC is.
Okay,
now.
okay, so close by.
On 1300 South, down in that area. My father's farm, the home I was born in, is now on the Registry of National Historic Buildings.
Is that right?
It's right in the heart of UVSC.
Do you lived in that home, or is that where your father was born, you said?
That's where I was born.
Oh, really?
It was built by my grandfather and grandmother in 1880 somewhere.
Well, I'll be.
And
so you went to high school at, you said Lincoln High School?
Yes.
Lincoln High School. You graduated in 1944. Mm-hmm. And then did you end up going to UVSC? Did you go to college?
BYU.
Oh, you did go to BYU. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when did you meet Clyde?
We lived in the same ward, and when he came back from the military, I was directing the music, and I guess he kind of became interested in me because he could see me up on the stage directing music.
Is that right?
So it wasn't long till we started dating, and that was in January, and we were married in April.
Wow.
Didn't take long.
3 months?
Didn't take long.
Holy cow.
He'd come home from the military a year earlier, I think. I don't know. Tell him your story, Clyde. And ended up at the hospital in Salt Lake, Veterans Hospital.
Clyde's walking around the house somewhere. He's not here.
Well, he was wounded. I'll have to tell you about that. And ended up in 3 hospitals, I think. Idaho, San Diego, and Salt Lake City, I guess.
So, Grandpa, come here. We have some questions for you.
Yeah, because I'm getting your story all twisted.
So you served in the
Marine Corps.
In the Marine Corps. When was that?
And there's my picture.
This is your picture up here? And who painted that?
That's an oil painting done by my cousin, Leo R. Weeks. He was back, he painted this back in 1946, I guess. I had been wounded in the invasion of Guam during 1944, and I was in 5 different naval hospitals. There's my war wound, hand grenade lit at my feet in Guam and about blew my legs off, I guess.
Are you kidding me? I didn't know that.
And they, a couple of corpsmen hauled me off to the beach and sent me out on a Red Cross hospital ship. And I wound up at the Pearl Harbor Hospital. I was there for a month or so, I guess. They put a cast on my leg from hip to tip of my toe. And so I went to 5 different naval hospitals in the United States. My cousin, Leo Weeks, was a fine artist, meaning he did oil paintings. And his day job was painting the covers of the Popular Mechanics magazine.
Oh, you're kidding me. No kidding.
So on the weekends, he did fine art. He's probably one of the most notable artists in the Chicago area in Illinois. And one day he said, so I could go visit him every weekend. He and his wife didn't have any children, so they were delighted to entertain me for a weekend. And he said, I'd like to paint you, sir. He had me sit down and painted me. He painted me a a bus picture that's in my study.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that turned out pretty good. Let's get a full-length picture. So he got a stick, walking stick, that were typically prominent military people would carry to look official, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And sat me down on his couch, and that's the colors you see there. The background obviously was not real.
Yep.
But that's where I had been fighting in the South Pacific, and so it looked like I was just looking out the window, I guess.
So what group were you with? You were with the Marines, but what division were you with?
The 6th Marine Division.
And were you with a particular troop or regiment or anything like that? Is that what they are?
No, it's just called the 6th Marine Regiment. I went to boot camp in San Diego in 1943, and went to Hawaii for training, and then went off to my first invasion in the Marshall Islands, which had been a group of islands that the Japanese had possessed for probably 100 years. So they were just Japanese were all over the place. So they were what they call atolls. They were just small groups of islands in a big cluster here. So my first assault was on the Njivi Island. We took that, and then we went on to Kwajalein Island and conquered that. Nobody ever surrendered, so the alternative took place. So the big job after we got through was mainly digging big holes and burying bodies.
Oh my goodness.
And they sent us back to Maui for some more training. And while I was in Hawaii, in Honolulu, I was going down to town and shopping, and came into a bookstore. And I found a book called, what was it called? It was a book of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And I bought it. And it contained 44 poetic sonnets. And for my next sea adventure, that's the only thing I had to read. And so I met
It was called the Sonnets of the Portuguese.
Yeah, Sonnets from the Portuguese was the name of the book. And it had 14 sonnets in it. And that's all I had to read for 3 weeks, so I wound up memorizing all of the 44 sonnets in that book. And the one that's best known by people is "How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways."
Yeah,
Well, that's where that's from.
No kidding. I did not know that.
So a sonnet is 14 lines written in a particular fashion with the rhyming scheme the same for all. And so I became enamored of that particular gender of poetry, and so I've written quite a lot of poetry since that time, and quite often used that rhyming scheme.
So is that where you first got your love of writing? I mean, did it originate back to that book, or was it before that?
Oh, well, no, I started writing. Actually, the first thing I ever wrote was, I also played the violin, so I kind of got into music a bit. So my first thought was writing one that I called Bathtub Serenade, which I'm sure was very amateurish, and I don't even have a copy of it.
Give me 1 or 2 lines.
Can't even tell you 1 or 2 lines, but later on I did write one called The Kid Next Door. I've got it in the book here. I'll read it to you if you want to hear it.
Sure, you bet.
So this would have been when we moved from Fort Douglas to San Antonio, Texas, just before World War II started.
Now, your family, your parents lived up at Fort Douglas, and then you moved to San Antonio?
My dad he'd been in the Army since 1917.
Oh, my goodness.
He was in World War One.
And he was on General Eisenhower's staff in England and was sent to New York, and in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, his ship was torpedoed and he jumped into the flaming ocean. And when they pulled him out, he was a raving maniac and remained that way for 5 years until we were married. And it was like the gates of hell opened and let him out. Clyde went to visit him a couple of times in Fort Lyon, Colorado. And when Melody was born, that's when he was rescued from that hell.
And his name was what? What was his name?
Clyde Weeks Sr.
It was Clyde Weeks Sr., okay. And Grandpa, do you remember what ship he was on that got torpedoed? Do you remember the name of the ship he was on?
It had been engineered, I guess, of a cruise ship. So it just had a number.
Okay.
But when he was coming back from
England
in the middle of the ocean, why the ship burst out into fire. Don't know whether it was a torpedo or what, but anyhow.
He was on General Eisenhower's staff in England and was sent to New York for what?
Well, he was sent on an assignment to New York, and in the middle of the ocean, the ship caught fire, and everybody had to abandon ship. And you saw the Titanic movie?
Yeah.
Where the people are out there bobbing in the water and hoping to stay afloat. Well, that's what they were for quite a few hours. And so they finally saw a ship coming and didn't know whether it was a German ship, which would have killed them all, or an American ship. And
Or Japanese ship.
It was an American ship, and picked everybody up, and not a single one died.
You're kidding.
They all arrived in New York. Some were taken to hospitals and whatnot, but on that particular event, everybody was rescued on that ship. But at least one of them, my father, had become totally unhinged during the experience. And when they took him to the hospital, they declared that he was totally a raving maniac. And so...
Which is interesting, he remained that way for 5 years until the morning when our Melody, our first child, was born on April 24th, 1946. The doctors contacted Clyde from the hospital in
Fort Lyon, Colorado, Veterans Hospital. He'd been there for 5 years.
So this ship was sunk during World War II? This is okay, so he was serving.
And they said on the morning of April 24th, your father showed a slight improvement. Could you come? And it was as though the gates of hell had opened and let him out. That was the morning our first baby was born. And it was she who really helped him back to reality. He'd sit and hold her for hours, rocking her, because she was not afraid of him, and he was not afraid of her. So she was his lifeline.
Yeah, that's interesting how you would never see that diagnosis of raving lunatic. They don't have that diagnosis anymore. They would call it something else, probably post-traumatic stress or something, but it wouldn't be raving lunatic.
Well, in those days they did, yeah. So he came back, and interesting story. My mother had died of cancer just shortly before he was sent to England. And so he was pretty distraught by that. So that, together with the burning of the ship,
It's just too much.
Heading over the edge. But I went to see him a couple of times, and finally I took him out on a visit for the weekend, and went back to the doctor and says, "Can I take him home on a trial visit?" He said, "Yeah, take him home. We hope you never see him again." So we did, and we got home, and after he got settled in, he got a job at the Singer Sewing Machine Company in Provo as assistant manager. And he worked there for a couple of years, I guess, and he met a woman from California who divorced her husband and brought her 4 kids with her to BYU to finish her education. And she'd come in the sewing machine company to get something done, and 4 days later he'd proposed to her and they got married.
Are you kidding me? 4 days. Holy cow.
So,
Did that marriage last?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
But so he was very successful in the sewing machine business, and he had a van that he would take to carry the sewing machines, and he'd travel all over the West selling. And one day the district manager came and said, "We're changing our policy. You're going to have to drive your own car now. You won't have a truck available." And my dad says, "I don't have a car. I walk to work and I don't have a car." And he says, "Well, I guess you'll have to buy one, won't you?" And he says, "No, I won't buy one. I want a truck." And he says, "Well, you're going to have to buy one." And my dad says, "I quit." So after 13 years, he quit and went home and was cooling his heels. And
13 years? No. Maybe 3.
he worked at Singer for 13 years.
I think if you went back and looked at it, then he couldn't have. I don't know. It doesn't seem possible.
Well, anyhow, so he went home, and meanwhile his wife had got her diploma at BYU and actually became the secretary of the alumni office at BYU.
Oh, really?
And so
And what was her name?
Emily Stoddard,
Emily Stoddard.
she got married, and Stoddard that she'd married, she had 4 children with him, but they got divorced, and she came she'd been in California. She came to Utah. Anyhow, my dad was born in Michigan, and after he got out of grade school, his parents wouldn't let him go to high school because he had to work. He was a very, very poor family. So he was born in Michigan. Remember that. So one day his wife came home and said, "Well, they're starting a new program at BYU called the Destiny Fund to raise funds for different projects in the university. And a man from California is coming to be the director of it, and he's interviewing for an assistant director to work with him. Why don't you go and apply for that job? You've worked with General Eisenhower, surely you could do that job." So he went and got an appointment and was interviewed, and the director was quite fascinated by his career in the Army and General Eisenhower and whatnot. They said, "Oh, by the way, what's your school?" My dad said, "Michigan." He said, "You're hard."
That was grade school.
Yeah, right.
And so, of course, he was quite competent, writing letters for Eisenhower and things like that. And so it wasn't like he was incompetent. He was able to, after having been in a mental hospital for 5 years and whatnot. So for the next 13 years, he was on the staff at BYU, on the faculty as an assistant director of it used to be called the Destiny Fund, then it was the Development Office, and then it was the philanthropic branch of the church, and they kept changing the names. But
He also had a very beautiful handwriting style, didn't he?
yeah, when he was stationed in the Philippines, one of his fellows in the office was a Filipino who had a very beautiful style of his handwriting. And Dad saw that and asked him to teach him how to do that. So when he was only about 22 years old, he learned how to write beautiful handwriting, and that stood him well all of his life. Every time he worked with somebody who got a promotion or something, they'd come and want him to fill it out in his handwriting. So he lived a very interesting life. And the day that he quit the Singer Sewing Machine Company, the next day he went back to get some of his stuff at the store, and at the door of the company was the manager of the next door furniture store. His name was Sessions. And he said, "Clyde, are you moving out of Provo? Are you leaving? We've heard you've left your job." And Dad said, "No, we're not leaving." And he said, "Well, we're changing the bishops in the stake, and everybody wants you to be the new bishop."
Oh, really?
And so that kind of bowled him over, but he agreed, and he'd been on the High Council in the ward and MIA president and stuff like this. And he'd been a High Councilor during those years. So they made him the bishop of the Provo 8th Ward. And he was there, and then he went to the Y. They made him a bishop at the Y, and then he was in the stake presidency of one of the BYU stakes.
And this is all after he had spent 5 years pretty much catatonic, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So when he turned 70, he wrote a letter to President Oakes, who was the president of the university at the time, and said, "My retirement time has come. While I hear my request to be honorably retired." So he retired, and a year later they were called on a mission to Cambridge, England. So they went over there for 18 months on a mission.
Oh, great.
So that was my dad.
No, Grandma was telling me here that you met her when you returned from the war, and you were in the same ward together. She was directing the music, and that's how you first.
That's how we met.
That's how she caught your eye.
My uncle was the bishop of the ward, and so it was quite naturally. The problem was the war was over, and the young men started returning home like I had, and she was going with 5 or 6 other guys.
Oh, Grandma, say it isn't so.
He had to grab me while he could, in between, before I married somebody else.
So therein lies the urgency of the January to April courting, huh?
That's right, yes. Didn't take him long.
Well, I guess you had to be decisive back then, right? You didn't have a lot of time to think it over.
Well,
back in those days, we had our state conferences in the Sura Theater.
Oh, really?
We didn't have all these state buildings like we have in Orem today. Back at that time, there was only about 5,000 people living in Orem. So one afternoon, I went to the state conference, and lo and behold, who was sitting in the back row but she and another fellow. And I thought, well, she came with him, so I just went over and sat on the other side.
can you imagine that?
Oh, that's so funny.
So the conference proceeded, and Marky Peterson was the visitor for the conference that day, and he told about a girl who had gone with 2 boys before the war, and one had been faithful in the church and the other one hadn't, and whatnot. And so she finally married the one who had been faithful in the church. And
it was our story.
about then I wrote a little note to her and says, "Helen, I love you very much. Will you marry me?"
Yeah, right then and there.
So I handed over the note to her, and
I don't know, the boyfriend was sitting on the other side.
Oh my gosh.
And so she wrote back, "I'll tell you after the meeting."
You know why? I didn't want to walk home. I figured if I said that, then he would offer me a ride home instead of walking 2 miles.
When I was gone, I had to withdraw funds out of my $50 a month paycheck. I saved up $800 while I was in the military, and so I bought a 1938 Packard coupe. So I had wheels.
Very good.
And so that's what she wanted to ride home with.
So you walked out after, and you just ditched your other date, Grandma?
Well, he really wasn't a date. It was just
Okay.
he was sitting next to the three of us were sitting there, and Clyde didn't know that I didn't come with him, and I guess I wanted to ride home.
So you walked out. You told him yes.
Not exactly.
How did that work?
We rode home, and then what? We dated for, that's when he began, I guess, coming more frequently.
I guess she realized I was serious about that time, and so then I gave her a ring, and about 3 weeks later she gave it back.
Why? I don't remember.
She never would tell me why, but so another week or two went by, and I don't know if, I guess I called her and asked her to go out to go to a movie or something, and started up again, and one night she said, "Can I have my ring back?" So
we were married 4 months later.
My goodness.
Salt Lake Temple.
and 9 kids later. Yeah.
The Salt Lake Temple. Funny how a chance meeting turned into 9 kids and...
Now 40 grandkids and 44 great-grandkids.
Oh my goodness.
Multiply and replenish the earth and have joy in your posterity.
Isn't it great?
Mm-hmm.
And as hard as raising kids are, having families around as you get older, it's got to be just a blessing, I would think.
Oh, it is indeed. And now, I mean, we've been surrounded by our family all these years. For how many years have we been married?
65 years.
Holy
Yeah. And now Skylar's moving here from Pennsylvania, so they'll all be here except Allie in California.
No, I thought Sky... Has he not moved here already? I thought he had. Is Sky not here? Is he still in Pennsylvania?
He has
No, they bought a home here. They're back there doing some business.
Oh, okay.
But he'll be here a week from this Saturday and back in their home. But I guess I ought to tell you how I became postmaster.
Yes.
Well, in high school and really throughout my college time and whatnot, I was a writer. I liked to write. I'd write for example, when I went for a semester at the University of Utah before I turned 17. I graduated from Provo High School when I was 16. And so, and then Pearl Harbor came, and I wasn't old enough to join the Army like my dad had done. So I graduated from Provo High when I was 16, enrolled at the University of Utah for a semester, and then when I turned 17, I learned that I could join the United States Marine Corps when I was 17. So that's what I did. But when I was at the University of Utah, I was on the staff of the Utah Chronicle, the newspaper, and started writing for that. And in the Marine Corps, when I was aboard ship, I would write for the newspaper on the ship. And when I was in the hospital, I wound up writing for the hospital newspapers. And so finally, when I got home, I started writing a column in the Provo Daily Herald about Orem, called Orem Miscellany.
Orem what?
Miscellany.
Miscellany.
Meaning
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I didn't know my sister and my brother had been living with our aunt and uncle after my mother died and my dad was gone. And so when I came back, I lived with them. And so when I turned 17, I joined the Marine Corps and got on the old trolley, went to Salt Lake and got sworn in as a Marine. The day before I got sworn in, I stopped in at the blood bank and gave them a donation of blood. So the next day I was scheduled to take my physical to join the Marine Corps. And they, for some reason, gave me a very stiff physical exam. And finally the doctor came and said, well, we're sorry, but you didn't pass your physical exam. And he said, you got a problem with your blood pressure. So we have to turn you down. Well, I said, I can't imagine what's the matter with my blood. It was okay yesterday when I gave it to the Red Cross. He said, what? I said, yeah, I gave my blood at the Red Cross. He said, come back here. He stamped approved on my paper.
Is that right? Right there.
So even when I got aboard ship, I wound up writing for the ship newspaper.
Oh, funny.
So when I came home, I didn't know what to do. I was going to school to Y, and so I went down to the Daily Herald in Provo and said, you don't have anything much about Orem in your paper. How'd you like to have me be a correspondent and give you a column every Sunday? And so they hired me to do that, and I picked the brains of my aunt and uncle, who'd lived here since 1929 and knew everything about everything in Orem.
Mm-hmm.
So in one of my columns, I complained about the lack of a library in Orem. And about 3 days later, I got a call on the telephone, and he said, is this Clyde Weeks? And I said, yes. He said, well, this is Orem Mayor J.W. Gilman. I've just read your column complaining about not having a library in Orem. And you're right about that. Except you're wrong about that. And I'll tell you why. And he said, in 1938, we bought this building that we have the city hall in now, and we got a grant from the government to open a library in the basement. And so we opened the library in 1938, and it was going pretty well. And then December 7th, 1941 happened. And so we shut the library down, put paper over the shelves, and turned the library into a rationing center. During the war, people had to get coupons to buy sugar,
Yep.
gasoline, and things like that.
My grandmother has some of those. I've got some of those from her.
So we closed the library down when the war started. And it's just never been started up again. And since you're so interested in the library, I'm commissioning you to get the library open again. So I was quite taken back by that. And I said, well, how much money will we have to work with? And he says, none. He said, you got your column, you write about it in your column and solicit donations from the public and get it open. So I went and got the key, and Helen and I went up to the library and opened up, brushed the cobwebs away from the door, and the door squeaked open, and there it was, ration books all over the floor, spiders crawling all over the floor, mice crawling, papers torn off of the walls behind the books. And they said, do we really want to get into this? So we went out and borrowed a few vacuums and brushes and brooms and whatnot and spent the rest of the day cleaning up the library. And so I wrote in my column the next week what was going on and soliciting contributions from the public. And so after a week or two, we thought, well, what do we do? guess how much we had collected?
Nothing.
0. Not a single person had contributed. And so we just about gave up on that, and then I got a phone call. He said, "This is so-and-so, a businessman in Orem. I've read about your library problem, and he says, I think we need one too. I'll send you a check for $75 every month to pay the librarian's salary, on one condition, that you never reveal my name." Oh, I said, "Oh, I can promise you that." So he sent me the $75, and for the next year, he did that. We hired a librarian and got it open for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 9 months later, the city council met and appropriated a $500,000 levy for the library's operation. They created a library board, named me the chairman of the library board. And so we were off and running with the library in the basement of the city hall. And so it succeeded. Gradually it went to another location, and finally they built the new city center, and one end of it became the library, which we started.
So who was the businessman?
Well, he's dead now. He was the man who had the first car dealership in Orem by the name of Doug Smith.
Doug Smith, huh?
And so,
But that wasn't his name at the time.
yeah, it was.
It was? I thought it was J.W. Gilman.
No, J.W. Gilman was
The mayor.
who
That was
commissioned me to get it open.
And you
But
saying
the
Doug
man who
Smith?
gave me the money was Smith.
I didn't remember that.
And so when he died a couple of years ago, I didn't think I needed to keep it secret anymore. So he was the benefactor, and so that's how that happened.
So did his family ever learn about that? Did they ever know?
I wrote about it in my column.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Except for the name of the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of what I wrote about. So, and then I advertised for somebody, and a woman came who had had experience as a librarian, and
Right.
and her name was Johnson, and so that's how that happened.
Was that Margaret?
So one day, I'd got a job working at Geneva Steel while I was going to the Y. And
His first job when he came home from the hospital.
well, I was also going to BYU. One day I got a phone call from a man who said, "This is P.K. Nielsen. I'm the manager of the Orem Geneva Times newspaper, and I've been reading your column in the Daily Herald. And as you may know, our owner, Arthur V. Watkins, has been elected to the United States Senate. And he's also been the editor of the paper. And of course I knew that. He was actually my stake president at the time also. And he said, he's leaving. I like what you've been writing. I'd like to offer you the job as the editor of the Orem Geneva Times.
Are you recording this?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And so here I had a job with a steady paycheck, and this was a weekly newspaper that had been started in 1930. And I thought, gee, editor of the Orem Geneva Times. I said, well, how much is it going to pay? And he said, well, how much are you getting now? And I told him, and he says, well, come down and look over our shop and then decide what you want to do. So the office was in Provo, right next to the liquor store. So I went down and looked it over, and he told me what it was all about, and so I agreed to become the editor of the Orange Geneva Times. Quit my job at Geneva Steel, and they paid me the same as I had there. Started writing the editorials, and after I'd been there a couple of weeks, P.K. Nielsen says, "Clyde, I want you to come with me for a few minutes." And so I went with him, and he introduced me to all the merchants in town. And when we got through, he said, "Now you're also the advertising manager." He said, "What pays to put the paper out? These people putting ads in the paper," which of course I knew.
Yeah.
And I had never sold any advertising.
Uh-huh.
But I did then. I started making my rounds and selling it because he was retiring. He's an older fellow, and he was about ready to retire. And so I became the advertising manager as well as the managing editor, and and off we were. So I had quite a great experience meeting people and whatnot. Then one day, he said, "Clyde, Senator Watkins, gone back and taken his seat in the Senate. Senator Watkins has sold the Orange Geneva Times to the editor of the Vernal Express newspaper, a man by the name of Neff Smart. And he'll be here next week to take over the ownership of the paper. And I guess he'll be doing what you're doing." So I thought, oh boy, now what? I quit Geneva, what do I do? So I just kept at it, and he kind of showed up, and he showed Nielsen around, and then he said,
Neff Smart.
he said, "You're out in the Vernal Express, how did you set your type for your newspaper?" And he said, "Well, it was a great big machine that set it automatically." He said, "Well, there's the one that we have." And typically those that come to operate that are kind of traveling hobos, traveling printers. And they come and work for a little while, and then they go on. And I've been doing the work on this linotype, is what they called it. You ever heard of a linotype? Well, before they had computers and all this stuff, why, it was kind of like a huge typewriter. And they'd have a pot of molten lead. You did lead soldiers, didn't you?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, well, instead of creating a soldier, it would cast one letter.
Okay.
And so it would have a keyboard. And so as you would read the script of what you were writing, of the newspaper story,
Uh-huh.
you would have to hit the keys. Each time you hit a key, the master of that letter would go down in molten lead and come up with a slug of molten or of
Solid.
lead,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
with that letter
Imprinted on it.
in it, indented in it. And so they would collect into what we call a line of type.
My
So the
gosh.
machine was called a linotype.
Okay.
And so you'd have these lines about this long, about that thick, that wide. And so they would click into a trough, and they would print copy, and as you come to the end of a line, it would click down in here. So you'd have a tray about this long with the story.
Holy cow.
And then they'd have what they call a chase, which is a big steel frame. And they'd put that on a rock slab that would be impervious to heat. And they would put this kind of a frame around it. And then they would put 8 divisions in it, so there would be 8 columns of type. Now, rarely do you see anything that big anymore.
Yeah.
I think the most newspapers have about 5 columns.
Yeah.
But the sheets were about that wide.
Wow.
And so they would take these columns and put them in there. And then they could, if there was a mistake or something, they would take it out and make a new one, correct it, throw it back in the pot and heat it up. And
Just reused them, right? Reheated
so
them and
it was
reused them.
pretty complicated.
Yeah, very complicated.
Almost as complicated as a computer. And so, anyhow, P.K. Nelson said to F. Smart, I'll be leaving in a couple of weeks. I suggest that you learn to operate the linotype, since you never know when a trained operator is going to come through here that you can hire.
Yeah.
He says, I'll teach you. And so, instead of, and the Neff said, well, you can stay 2 weeks and then we'll have to let you go. And then he came back and said, well, Clyde, can you stay a little longer?
He didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Well, 5 years later, he moved the shop out to Orem. And he was still on the linotype, but I was still.
Oh my goodness.
He also wrote some stuff too, but he was the operator of that big, huge, bigger than this room.
Man alive.
And so I worked there for 5 years, and then I would take the newspapers to the post office to be delivered in the mail. So one day I saw that in the paper there, the post office was advertising that there was a story in the paper that the postmaster had resigned. His name was Ron McDonald, and an acting postmaster by the name of Leo Broadhead had been appointed to take his place. And that civil service examinations would be given so that residents of the community could take a civil service examination and become candidates to become the permanent postmaster.
That took a bit of courage, didn't it?
So I read it and thought, okay, so about 3 months later, the test had been given and the notice came out that only 2 people had passed the test.
Oh, you're kidding.
And that the civil service laws required 3 people from whom 1 could be selected to be the postmaster. And in those days, if the President of the United States was one party, like a Democrat,
The Vice President.
the Democratic representative or senator in that state would recommend which of those who passed the test would become the postmaster.
Really?
It was called the spoils system. You ever heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Well, it was still alive and well in 1951. And so they appointed the guy who had been driving the road grader for Orem City to be the acting postmaster. And he only had 1 leg. But he had an artificial leg, so he came in and anyhow, so we happened to have a female representative named Reva Beck-Bissoni. And so she announced that since there were only 2 that passed it, they would give the civil service test again. And so I thought, well, golly, all those guys failed it. Maybe I can take it. Maybe I can pass it. And so I sent in my application to take the test along with, well, 8 of us took the test one Saturday afternoon. We went to a big hall and they handed out the papers and we took the test, 8 of us. So about 3 months later, it came out in the paper that the results of the test showed that Clyde Weeks was number 1 on the list of those who had passed it. And number 2 on the list was Reed Hacking, who was an employee of the post office at the time and a Republican. And the 3rd candidate was Leo Broadhead, who was the acting postmaster and a Democrat. So I was a Democrat, number 1. Number 2 was a Republican. Number 3 was a Democrat.
And the acting postmaster.
And so Reva Beck-Bissoni asked the Democratic Committee of Orem to meet and to interview the 3 who passed the test and to recommend one of those that she could recommend to President Truman to nominate as postmaster. So they held the meeting, and I made my spiel, and Reed Hacking, who was a clerk in the post office, didn't come because he was a Republican and had no chance of being appointed.
Yeah.
And Leo Broadhead, who was acting postmaster, of course, was a Democrat, and everybody knew him. He'd been in World War I, and I was just a 25-year-old veteran of World War II. And so guess who they voted for? Leo Broadhead.
Oh, they did?
Of course. I was just an upstart kid. Why would they want me to be the postmaster? So they sent the name of Leo Broadhead to Reva Beck Bissoni, and she sent the name of Leo Broadhead to President Truman, and he sent the name of Leo Broadhead to the Senate of the United States, who had to confirm it by, just like they do today in the Senate. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't confirm.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were all ready to confirm him. Leo Broadhead, the postmaster, the permanent postmaster. And then the news came out. Oh, those who took the test, if they were a veteran, they were given 5 points added to their score. And if they were a disabled veteran, they were given 10 points added to their score. Well, I was a disabled veteran, so I had 10 points added to my score. And Leo Broadhead said that he was a veteran, and so they added 10 points to his score. But just before they confirmed him, they found out that his missing leg didn't go missing until after World War I.
No, so they gave him 5 points too much.
So they took the 5 points away. He was no longer one of the top 3 on the register.
Oh my goodness.
And so Reva Beck Bissoni told the committee, have another meeting. These are the 3 that you got to pick from. And I was still number 1. And she waited and waited and waited. And she finally said, well, if I don't receive your recommendation by a certain date, I will appoint the top man on the register. And so they wrote all kinds of letters in about how terrible I was, and I had my hand in the till. I don't know what else they said about me, and so they didn't have the meeting. And so she said, if you don't meet by such and such a date, I will appoint the number 1 man on the register. So they didn't hold the meeting. She sent my name to President Truman. He sent my name to the Senate. And I got a telegram for Senator Watkins saying, Clyde, you have been nominated today to be the new permanent postmaster of Orem.
No kidding.
And then of all the gall, when the postmaster contacted me about swearing me in, the postal inspector,
Mm-hmm.
he said, Mr. Broadhead is asking if you will put off taking office for a couple of weeks until he gets the next paycheck, because he's hurting for money. And if you could just wait 2 weeks to be installed, why, he could get his paycheck. I said, well, I quit my job at the Orem Geneva Times 2 weeks ago, and I need a paycheck too. So I'm sorry. So next Monday morning, I knocked on the door of the post office and said, ta-da, I'm the new postmaster. And so there was Reed Hacking, who was, like I say, had been working in the post office, and a couple of them were friends of mine. The others weren't quite sure, and I knew everything about licking a 3-cent stamp. So they had to teach me my job.
Yeah, sure.
Those who had been happy with Leo Broadhead.
Yeah.
And so then started a campaign of trying to get me out somehow, trying to get the goods on Clyde Weeks. But they didn't get any goods on me.
Never materialized. And you were postmaster for
40 years.
40 years. Holy
So
smokes.
everybody that was in there died, retired, left, and
Yeah.
so when I left 40 years later, everybody there was people that I had hired.
Yeah, yeah.
And some of them had died, and a few are still alive. But so that's how Grandpa finally became the postmaster of Orem.
How long have you been retired?
And I retired in 1990. Wait a minute. Been retired 20 years.
20 years. Well, what a story. What a story.
Thank you for capturing that.
Yeah, it's going to be great to have on video and audio. I can distribute it in both ways, yeah. Well, I need to, before I go, I need you to tell your violin story. I want to capture your story of how you got your first violin and then hear an actual performance of your first violin song.
Well, our family lived at Fort Douglas. My father was in the Army. I've been in the Army since 1917 in World War I. He married my mother, who was a girl from Canada, who had been in training as a nurse. They got married, and he was assigned to the Philippine Islands, where I was born on November 18th, 1925. And after a couple of years, they were sent back to Fort Douglas, Utah, and where my dad was stationed for the next 15 years. Anyhow, time went by, and I became 9 years old. We were living at Fort Douglas, and my parents said to Clyde, your mother and I are going to get your birthday present. So you stay and read a book, and we'll be back shortly. And so I read a book, and after a while they came home, and they came in the door, and my dad was carrying this strange looking thing that I thought looked like an alligator. Looked just like the skin of an alligator. And I said, "What is it?" And my dad said, "It's a violin, and it's a musical instrument, and you're going to learn how to play it." I says, "I don't want to play a violin, I want to play baseball." And my dad said, "Well, if you want to play baseball, you've got to learn to play the violin. And your music teacher will be here next Wednesday at 6 o'clock to give you your first violin lesson." Well, I shook my head, and I didn't want any part of that thing. So about a week later, the doorbell rang, and I went to the door and opened it. And there, standing in the door, was a big, tall soldier dressed in a military uniform. And he said, "Hello, Bunny," which used to be my nickname. "I'm Sergeant Bandel, and I'm your new violin teacher. And I also play the trumpet in the Fort Douglas military band." Just then my dad saw him and said, "Come in." He told me, he said, "Clyde, take him upstairs into your bedroom and he'll give you your first violin lesson." I didn't know anything about music, didn't know anything about violins, but I did think it was rather strange that I had a violin and my teacher didn't bring his violin and never did. But that's okay, but he taught me a lot about music. So it was a pretty traumatic experience having to open this violin up. And it was the strangest looking thing I ever saw. And cut in the top of the violin were these strange holes. And I said to Sergeant Bandel, "Well, what are they for?" And he said, "Well, that's so that the music can come out. If you didn't have those, the music wouldn't come out." And then he said, "Look carefully inside this hole. And you'll see a little piece of paper stuck against the back inside the violin." And so I looked at it, and it said, "Vienna Strad." And I said, "What does that mean?" He said, well, it was made in Vienna, Austria, and it was a copy of a violin made by Antonio Stradivarius, who was the most famous violin maker of all time. He said, Vienna Strad, handmade, 1911. And I thought, my, that's an old violin. So
100 years old now.
I never thought much about it till lately. I looked at that the other day and I thought, 1911, 1811, 1911, 2011, this violin is 100 years old.
Imagine.
And it's as beautiful as it was the day it was made. So, he tried to teach me about the notes, like the A string, or the E string, the A, B, and the G. And so I did a lot of scales. So one at a time, one finger at a time, I figured out what it was all about. And then he said, it's time to play a song. And so he gave me the music, and this is how it sounded.
That's beautiful.
Well, and downstairs in the living room was my violin teacher's wife, my mother, and my father, holding their hands over their ears. And so I've been trying ever since to learn to play that song. And so on.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm running.
Okay, on my violin's 100th anniversary, it had a baby. And there it is. We call that Clyde Jr. the Third. And this is how he sounds.
Oh, lovely. Very nice.
Very nice.
Well, you might be interested in some of the books that I've written and some of the music I've written. There's a song I wrote many years ago when our daughter Mary Christie was just a little tyke. Elvin the Christmas Elf. Elvin the Christmas Elf simply was beside himself when Christmas came. So I'll give you
Very good.
my copies of these. And
Lovely.
Elvin the Christmas elf simply was beside himself when Santa said, Elvin. What? You'll have to stay behind.
as an outgrowth of my work at the Arms and Eva Times, one day I was in the city council meeting and people come in wanting to pick up a copy of the history of Orem. And they said, well, there isn't one. And I was in the front seat of the room, and one of the city council said, well, there's Clyde Weeks. Let's get him to write the history of Orem. And I took it back. I was taken back by that, and I agreed to do it. He said, we want it back. We want it done by 1 year. So in 1 year, I produced Sagebrush to Steel, an Orem centennial history from 1861 to 1961. And it's got pictures of all the mayors. And
oh, very nice.
actually, Orem has had 20 mayors since 1919, and I have known personally all of them.
Really? Wow.
Not all while they were mayor.
Yeah, right, but all during their lifetimes, yeah.
And while I was at the post office, I produced this book with all my postal employees called Orem Postal People. One day I hired Donnie Osmond's brother, who is hard of hearing, who was deaf. He and his older brother are deaf. And I hired him as a mail carrier. So one day I got him to get his sister to come in, and there's a picture of Tom, her brother, and there's Marie. And these are pictures that we took that day of Marie's.
Oh, how fun.
But these are pictures of all my employees in 1988 when I produced this book.
And you've got another one over there too. Did you do that one as well? What is that?
Well, this is Orem's 20th mayor, who just died last week, Jerry Washburn. And so I've got stories about all 20 of them. Some years ago, I produced for Orem City 63 copies of the Orem City Happenings newsletter. And in this book, I've got the 63 actual copies
Is that right?
incorporated in this book. So, and then there's stories about the history of Orem. There's the same page of the other history book.
Mm-hmm.
So I made this, and they're in the Orem City Library. And there's my book called Raspberry Rhymes and Vicarious Verses of a Mellow Mormon Bishop. And when Donnie was my counselor at BYU when I was bishop, he wrote the foreword to my book.
No kidding.
So,
Now,
to make things short, since your tape is about gone, I also wrote this book called 1,000 Holy Temples in the Earth. And this is about the first 50 temples of the church.
I think we have a copy of that at our house, actually.
And you should have a
Yeah,
copy
we
of
do
that.
have a copy of that.
Well, when you get home, get it out. I quit at 50. That was still under construction the St. Louis Temple.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I wasn't going to make any more than that because they're making more temples.
They're going too fast.